The twin suns of Arkin 9 hung low over the horizon, turning the endless desert into a sea of copper and gold. Heat shimmered above the dunes, bending the outlines of distant structures until they looked like floating cities. Ethan Ward stood knee-deep inside the exposed engine compartment of a massive military crawler that had not moved in nearly 30 years. The crawler was larger than most buildings, a relic from a forgotten war. Its armored hull carried scars from plasma impacts and meteor strikes, yet somehow the machine had survived everything except poor maintenance. Ethan wiped grease from his forehead and stared into a cluster of glowing circuits. Well, he said to the machine, either you're broken or you're pretending to be broken because you're lazy. The crawler unfortunately offered no opinion. A young alien technician nearby laughed, snorts like most citizens of the Empire. She looked almost human except for her long, elegant ears. You always talk to machines. They listen better than politicians. Machines can't listen. Exactly. The technician shook her head. A second later, the crawler's dormant reactor suddenly hummed to life. The machine's ancient lights flashed. The technician blinked. Ethan pointed triumphantly. You were saying? The enormous vehicle released a deafening roar as power surged through systems that had been dead for decades. Workers across the repair yard erupted into cheers. Ethan climbed down from the machine while trying to look modest. He failed completely. By afternoon he was sitting in the shade beside a cooling tower eating a questionable sandwich produced by an equally questionable food printer. The printer had promised roasted poultry. The result looked like melted insulation foam. Ethan poked it suspiciously. I miss real food. His wrist communicator suddenly chimed, then chimed again, then 10 more times. His expression changed. Messages from Imperial Command never arrived in groups. He opened the first transmission. Authorized personnel approaching. A transport descended from the sky before he could read the second message. Its black hole carried the crest of the Imperial Palace. The entire repair yard fell silent. The transport landed with military precision. Its ramp lowered. Armored guards emerged, dozens of them. Ethan looked around. Okay, he said. Who forgot to pay taxes? Nobody answered. The guards marched directly toward him. That was significantly less comforting. Their commander stopped a few meters away. Ethan Ward. Ethan raised his hand. The commander nodded. You will accompany us immediately. Why? The order comes directly from the Queen. Several workers gasped. Ethan laughed nervously. That's funny. The commander remained expressionless. Ethan stopped laughing. Oh, you're serious? Within an hour he was aboard the fastest vessel he had ever seen. Outside the observation window, stars stretched into rivers of light as the ship entered transit. The Imperial capital appeared. Shortly afterward, Ethan had seen pictures before. The images had not done it justice. The city covered an entire continent. Countless towers rose into the clouds. Orbital elevators connected the surface to glowing stations above. The atmosphere, traffic lanes filled the sky with streams of moving lights. Everything felt impossibly large. Palace itself sat at the center like a mountain made of silver. By the time Ethan entered the main ceremonial chamber, his confidence had begun abandoning him. Thousands of nobles, officers, scientists, and officials filled the enormous hall. At the far end stood Queen Lyra. She looked younger than he expected. Her long silver hair flowed across armor woven from luminous metallic fibers. Her blue eyes seemed sharp enough to cut through steel. Her long ears marked her alien heritage, yet otherwise she looked remarkably human. Most importantly, she looked annoyed. Very annoyed. Unfortunately, she appeared to be looking directly at him. Ethan immediately wondered whether fixing the crawler and staying home would have been the smarter choice. In the center of the chamber stood a machine unlike anything he had ever seen. A sphere of crystal and shifting light floated above an intricate platform. Energy flowed through it like liquid stars. A scientist stepped forward. The predictive genetic system is now ready. The chamber fell silent. Ethan had absolutely no idea why he was there. A feeling told him he was about to find out, and he was not going to enjoy the answer. The floating sphere at the center of the chamber slowly rotated, sending rivers of blue light across the polished floor. Every noble scientist and military officer watched it with absolute attention. Ethan stood alone near the platform, which was unfortunate. Whenever something strange happened, standing near the mysterious machine usually increased the chances of becoming part of the problem. The chief scientist raised both hands. The predictive genetic system has analyzed more than 12 trillion future genetic pathways. The enormous display above the chamber activated. Countless stars appeared, then family trees, then streams of information moving so quickly Ethan could barely understand what he was seeing. The system does not predict possibilities alone, the scientist continued. It identifies the most stable future bloodlines across time. Ethan quietly leaned toward a nearby guard. Can it predict who stole my toolbox 3 years ago? The guard stared straight ahead. I am on duty, so that's a no. The scientist continued speaking. The demonstration will use Her Majesty's genetic profile as the primary reference. Queen Lyra stepped forward. The chamber became even quieter. Ethan noticed that despite her calm appearance, the queen looked slightly uncomfortable. He couldn't blame her. Being analyzed by a machine in front of thousands of people sounded unpleasant. A beam of light emerged from the sphere. It scanned Lyra from head to toe. Symbols appeared above the platform. The machine hummed for several moments. Everything proceeded normally. Then a second beam suddenly shot across the room directly toward Ethan. Oh no, the beam struck him before he could move. The chamber gasped. The scientist frowned. That should not happen. I agree completely, Ethan said. The machine ignored him. The sphere brightened. Its light became almost blinding. The displays above the chamber rapidly changed. New genetic pathways emerged. Millions of calculations appeared simultaneously. Scientists rushed toward their consoles. Several looked alarmed. One looked like he might faint. The machine finally stopped. Silence filled the hall. The chief scientist stared at the results. His face turned pale. The queen narrowed her eyes. What is it? The scientist swallowed. Your Majesty. His voice cracked. Read it, Lyra ordered. The scientist hesitated. Every person in the chamber seemed frozen. Finally he looked at the central display. The system has identified the primary future bloodline. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The projected father of the future royal children. His gaze slowly shifted toward Ethan. Is Ethan Ward? For several seconds, absolutely nothing Happened. Ethan blinked, then blinked. Again. Excuse me. The chamber exploded. Into chaos. Nobles shouted. Military officers argued. Scientists frantically checked their equipment. One elderly noble appeared moments away from collapsing. Queen Lyra looked as though someone had personally insulted every ancestor she possessed. What? The single word echoed throughout the hall. The scientists immediately began rerunning calculations again and again and again. Each result produced the same answer. Ethan Ward, human mechanic, future father of the Queen's children. Ethan slowly raised a hand. I feel obligated to point out that I've only been here for about 20 minutes. Nobody appreciated the joke except one young scientist who accidentally laughed before immediately pretending not to. Lyra stepped down from the platform, her blue eyes locked onto Ethan. The entire chamber seemed to disappear beneath the weight of that stare. You, Ethan pointed at himself. Unfortunately, the Queen stopped a few steps away. Her expression remained perfectly controlled, which somehow felt more dangerous than anger. You have never met me before today. No, you have never communicated with me. No, you have never entered the capital. No, you have never attempted to infiltrate the palace. No. You have very specific questions. A few nearby guards struggled not to smile. Lyra ignored them. The chief scientist approached nervously. Your Majesty, we have completed 8 additional analyses, and every result is identical. The scientist looked genuinely terrified. The probability deviation is effectively 0. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in Lyra's eyes. She turned toward the floating sphere. The machine continued glowing peacefully, completely unaware that it had just thrown the Empire into madness. Above them, the massive display shifted once more. New information appeared. Thousands of future timelines vanished. Only one remained. At its center stood 2 figures, Queen Lyra and Ethan Ward. The chamber became silent again, far too silent. Ethan stared at the image. Then he sighed. Honestly, he muttered, I knew fixing that crawler this morning was going too well. And deep within the machine, unseen by everyone present, a sequence of symbols briefly appeared before disappearing again. A message not from the present, but from somewhere far ahead in time. 3 days later, Ethan was still not allowed to leave the palace. According to the official explanation, he was an individual of extraordinary scientific interest. According to Ethan, he was a prisoner with better furniture. The guest suite assigned to him was larger than the entire apartment he had lived in on Arcan 9. It contained a private garden, an artificial waterfall, 3 service robots, and a bed so large that he suspected small aircraft could land on it. He sat at a table examining a holographic report while a silver service drone floated nearby. The report contained 600 pages. Every page included his name. Every page made less sense than the previous one. Ethan closed it. I preferred life when my biggest concern was exploding engines. The drone beeped. I am unable to provide emotional support. That's disappointing. A second later, the door opened. Queen Lyra entered. The drone immediately retreated. Ethan noticed she looked tired, not physically tired, politically tired. There was a difference. The Queen crossed the room and activated a holographic display. Thousands of lines of data appeared above the table. The scientist completed another analysis. Ethan sighed. Let me guess, I'm still mysteriously involved in your future. You are good. Consistency is important. Lyra ignored the joke. She enlarged a section of the report. A strange sequence of symbols appeared, unlike the genetic data surrounding it. These symbols looked deliberate, almost like language. Ethan leaned forward. What is that? We don't know. The machine generated it. Yes, he studied the symbols. Something felt wrong, not dangerous, familiar. The sensation made no sense. He had never seen them before. Yet his brain seemed convinced otherwise. Lyra noticed his expression. What? I don't know. The answer irritated him. For several seconds he continued staring. Then a symbol near the center caught his attention. Without thinking, he reached out. His finger touched the hologram. Instantly the display changed. Every light in the room flickered. The symbols rearranged themselves. Both Ethan and Lyra froze. The new message appeared in Imperial standard: warning, temporal interference detected. The room became silent. Neither moved, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan pointed at the message. That's probably bad, probably fine, definitely. The display continued changing. Additional lines appeared. Primary timeline stability 82%, projected decline in progress, source of interference unknown. A chill ran through Lyra. Even Ethan stopped joking. The predictive genetics system was one of the most advanced technologies ever created. It was not supposed to malfunction, especially not in ways involving timelines. Suddenly another message appeared. Accessing archived future records. The display flashed. Then a face appeared. A young woman. She looked partly human, partly alien. Long ears, silver hair, blue eyes. The resemblance to Lyra was obvious. The resemblance to Ethan was somehow even more disturbing. Neither spoke. The young woman smiled directly at them. Static briefly crossed the image. Then she vanished. The display returned to normal. Ethan slowly stood. No. Lyra stared at him. No, no. He pointed at the empty display, whatever that was. Absolutely no. For the first time in days, the Queen almost smiled. That is your response? That person looked like she could be our daughter. The smile disappeared immediately. Both became very quiet. The reality of the situation suddenly felt heavier. A machine prediction was one thing. A face was something else. Before either could speak again, alarms erupted throughout the palace. Red lights flashed. The room shook. Ethan grabbed the table. What now? A security officer's voice echoed through the building. Emergency alert. Unauthorized access detected inside the predictive genetic core. Lyra's expression hardened instantly. The Queen was gone. The ruler had returned. She activated a communicator. Report. Unknown intruder, Your Majesty. Identity, we don't know. Location. The answer came several seconds later. The officer sounded confused. Inside the machine itself. Lyra frowned. That is impossible. Yes, Your Majesty. The palace shook again. Across the city, massive defense towers activated. Energy shields appeared around the capital. Ethan stared out the window. Far above the city, something shimmered briefly in the sky, like a tear in reality only. For a moment, then it vanished. The communicator crackled. A scientist's terrified voice filled the room. Your Majesty, we've discovered something. What? The scientist hesitated. The intrusion isn't coming from the present. Silent. The signal originates approximately 87 years in the future. Ethan closed his eyes. Of course it does. Lyra looked at him. You expected this? No. Then why are you acting calm? He sighed. Because at this point, future people breaking into machines from the future somehow feels like the most normal thing that's happened all week. And deep beneath the palace, hidden within the glowing heart of the predictive genetic system, an unknown figure watched them through a temporal connection, watching, waiting, and searching specifically for Ethan Ward. The palace remained on emergency lockdown long after the alarm stopped. Every corridor filled with soldiers. Every communication channel overflowed with reports. Every scientist seemed to be experiencing a collective nervous breakdown. Ethan discovered that royal crises involve significantly more paperwork than explosions. Frankly, he preferred explosions. Several hours after the temporal intrusion, he found himself standing inside the predictive genetic core. The chamber extended hundreds of meters underground. Towering columns of crystals surrounded a sphere of shifting energy larger than a transport ship. Streams of information flowed through the air like glowing rivers. The machine felt alive, not conscious but active, watching, thinking, calculating. Queen Lyra stood beside the central control platform while teams of scientists examined the system. Their expressions ranged from worried to horrified. Neither category inspired confidence. A senior researcher approached. We have confirmed the intrusion. Lyra folded her arms. And it originated 87 years in the future. Ethan nodded. Still sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. Nobody laughed. The researcher enlarged a holographic image. A fracture appeared in space itself, not physical space. Time. The crack resembled shattered glass suspended inside darkness. Energy leaked from its edges. The future signal entered through this temporal rupture. Lyra frowned. Can we identify who sent it? The researcher hesitated. No. Can we stop it? Another hesitation. No. Can we do anything useful? The researcher looked offended. Ethan liked the Queen a little more. After that, a second scientist suddenly rushed forward. Your Majesty. The entire room turned. The scientist activated another display. A recording appeared. Security footage. Timestamp 3 minutes. Before the intrusion, everyone watched carefully. The predictive genetic system sat quietly inside the chamber. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. Then a figure appeared. Not clear's throat. By entering, by materializing. One moment the space was empty. The next moment someone stood there, a hooded silhouette. The image flickered violently, as though reality itself struggled to display the person. The figure approached the machine, paused, then looked directly toward the camera. Toward them, toward the future viewers. Ethan felt a chill. The figure raised one hand. A symbol appeared, the exact symbol that had triggered the hidden message in Lyra's suite. The recording ended. Silence followed. One scientist finally whispered, "That's impossible." Ethan was beginning to hate that word. Everything important lately seemed impossible. The chief researcher expanded the image frame by frame. Unfortunately, the figure remained distorted. Identity impossible to determine. Gender impossible to determine. Species impossible to determine. Only one detail became clear. The figure was carrying something. Metallic object attached to their belt. The image zoomed further. Ethan's eyes Narrowed, wait, the room turned toward him. What? Lyra asked. He stepped closer. The object looked strangely familiar, very familiar, almost annoyingly familiar. His stomach sank. No, what is it? Lyra asked again. Ethan pointed. That's a plasma wrench. The scientist blinked. A what? A plasma wrench. The room remained silent. The chief researcher stared. The temporal intruder traveled across time, apparently, and while carrying a mechanic's tool. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Yes. The scientist looked disappointed. That's absurd. Welcome to my life. Lyra studied the image again. For the first time, she seemed genuinely curious. You recognize the design? Of course. How? Ethan zoomed the image further. His face slowly lost all humor. The room noticed immediately. What is it? Lyra asked quietly. The mechanic swallowed. Because I built it. Silence. Complete silence. The kind that made everyone uncomfortable. The plasma wrench in the image contained a unique modification, one he had invented years ago. No other copy existed, which meant only two possibilities remained. Either someone had stolen his tool, or the figure possessed a version that had not yet been built. Neither explanation felt reassuring. Before anyone could speak, the machine suddenly activated. Every crystal column illuminated. Simultaneously, energy surged through the chamber. Warning signals appeared everywhere. Temporal resonance detected. Source match found. Ethan stared. So that's bad, right? No, a scientist said weakly. Then he looked at the display. Actually, yes, very bad. New data flooded the screens. The machine had identified a connection not between Ethan and Lyra, not between past and future, between Ethan and the intruder. Compatibility matched 99.98%. Genetic correlation detected. The room froze. Lyra slowly turned toward Ethan. Ethan slowly turned toward Lyra. Neither liked what they were thinking. The machine completed its calculation, then revealed one final line. Possible descendant identified, and for the first time the future stopped feeling distant. It felt like it was already walking toward them. The words remained suspended above the machine. Possible descendant identified. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the scientists seemed afraid that making noise might somehow encourage the universe to become even stranger. Ethan stared at the display, then at the machine, then back at the display. I would like to officially resign from whatever is happening. A few researchers laughed despite themselves. Queen Lyra did not. She continued, staring at the data stream flowing across the holographic screens. Thousands of calculations appeared every second. The predictive genetic system was no longer performing ordinary genetic projections. It was searching, looking through timelines, analyzing futures, following connections that had not yet been created. The machine suddenly emitted a low hum. Every display shifted. New coordinates appeared. The chief scientist nearly dropped his tablet. What now? Another researcher leaned closer. His eyes widened. Oh, Ethan repeated. That's never a good reaction. The scientist swallowed. The machine has located the source of the strongest temporal connection. Lyra immediately stepped forward. Where? The answer appeared on the central display. A region beyond imperial space, beyond map territory, beyond even the oldest exploration records. The room became silent. One researcher whispered, "That's impossible." Ethan pointed. There it is again. Nobody paid attention. The scientists were too busy staring at the coordinates. The location existed inside an area known as the Black Expanse, an enormous region of distorted space where navigation systems regularly failed. Entire fleets had disappeared there over the centuries. Some ships returned decades later, some returned before they had departed, most never returned at all. The Empire had largely decided to avoid the place. Ethan thought that sounded very sensible. The machine disagreed. Second message appeared, temporal origin. Point detected, probability of future convergence 97.4%. The chief scientist looked pale. The future connection originates there. Lyra folded her arms. You are certain they machine is? That was not my question. The scientist wisely stopped talking. Ethan leaned toward a nearby screen. Let me guess. Nobody answered. The solution to all our problems is hidden inside a terrifying region where ships vanish. Still nobody answered. Good, I just wanted confirmation for the first time. All day Lyra almost smiled. A loud alarm interrupted the moment. Red symbols flashed across the displays. The machine had found something else. Recording older than the previous one. Far older. The image activated. Automatically, a woman appeared. She looked approximately 20 years old, long silver hair, long ears, blue eyes. The resemblance to Lyra was unmistakable. But this time there was no resemblance. To Ethan, not immediately. Then she smiled and Ethan felt his stomach drop. The smile was his. The same crooked expression, the same amused look, the same irritating confidence. The woman looked directly into the recording device. If you're seeing this, she said, then the timeline is becoming unstable again. The chamber fell silent. The recording continued. The woman appeared calm, comfortable, as though speaking to people she already knew. My name is Alara. The scientists rapidly began recording everything. All smiled slightly, and before anyone asks, yes, the prediction was correct. Several scientists immediately began whispering. Lyra's expression froze. Ethan covered his face with one hand. No, all laughed. The sound was warm. Natural, human, alien, both. Father is probably saying no right now. The entire room slowly turned toward Ethan. I don't like this recording. Neither do I, Lyra said quietly. The recording continued. All smile faded. If events are unfolding this early, then someone has already begun interfering. A distorted sound echoed behind her, almost like thunder, except it came from space itself. The Black Expanse contains the archive. The image flickered. The archive must remain hidden. Another flicker. The future survives because it remains hidden. The distortion grew stronger. All suddenly looked alarmed, as though she had noticed something approaching. If they find the archive before you do, the recording cut off. Gone just like that. Silence returned. The machine displayed a final line. Archive status unknown. Temporal threat level increasing. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Ethan sighed while the room looked toward him. He pointed at the coordinates. I suppose we're going to the giant haunted region of space. One scientist frowned. The Black Expanse is not haunted. A second scientist immediately replied, we actually don't know that. Ethan nodded. That answer concerns me greatly. For the first time since arriving at the palace, however, something had changed. The future no longer felt like an abstract prediction. It had a face, a name, Alara, and somewhere beyond the borders of known space, the mysterious archive was waiting along with whatever force had already begun hunting it. 4 days later, the Imperial exploration vessel Horizon crossed the outer border of known space. Behind it lay thousands of map systems. Ahead waited the black expanse. The name was accurate. Beyond, the observation window stretched. Region unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Stars appeared twisted. Distances seemed wrong. Entire constellations bent into impossible shapes. Even light behaved strangely. At one point, Ethan was fairly certain he had watched a star move backward. The ship's navigation computer disagreed, then disagreed with itself, then restarted. That did not improve confidence. Ethan stood on the bridge beside Queen Lyra. The crew worked quietly. Everyone seemed aware they were entering a place that history preferred not to discuss. The captain studied incoming sensor reports. Spatial distortions increasing. Expected. Lyra asked. No. The captain paused. Which means yes. Ethan nodded. Excellent. I always enjoy answers that make less sense afterward. Nobody looked surprised. His jokes had become part of daily operations. A scientist suddenly approached. Your Majesty, what is it? We've begun receiving temporal echoes. Ethan immediately disliked those words. What exactly is a temporal echo? The scientist activated a display. Images appeared, brief flashes, moments from different times. The bridge, the ship, the crew, but not from now. One image showed an empty bridge covered in dust. Another showed damaged walls and emergency lighting. A third showed Ethan sitting in the captain's chair. Everyone stared at him. Ethan stared back. I would never sit there without permission. The captain looked unconvinced. The image vanished. More appeared. Future possibilities. Past possibilities. Fragments of timelines colliding with one another. The black expanse seemed filled with them. Lyra watched quietly. The queen looked calm. Yet Ethan had begun noticing small details. The way she folded her arms when thinking, the way her eyes narrowed when worried, the way she occasionally glanced toward him whenever strained. Things happened recently that had become frequent. An alarm interrupted his thoughts. The ship shook hard. Several crew members grabbed nearby consoles. Report. The captain examined sensors. His expression changed. We have company. A holographic image appeared. Something was moving beside the horizon. Not another ship, not exactly. The object resembled a vessel, yet its structure seemed incomplete. Parts of it appeared transparent. Other sections flickered between different designs, like multiple versions occupying the same location. The scientists looked horrified. Temporal displacement. What does that mean? Ethan asked. It shouldn't exist. Ethan, everyone keeps saying that. The object moved closer. Suddenly, a transmission arrived. No identification. No origin, only a signal. The bridge fell silent. The transmission activated. Automatically, static filled the room. Then a familiar face appeared. Alara. The same young woman from the recording. Only this time she was alive, moving, breathing, looking directly at them. For several seconds nobody spoke. All smiled. Good. We finally found the correct timeline. Ethan nearly fell over. No, Alla laughed. You're definitely my father. No, exactly the response I expected. Several officers struggled not to laugh. Lyra remained Frozen, the future woman turned toward. Her expression softened. Hello. Mother, the bridge became completely silent for the first time since meeting. Ethan saw Queen Lyra genuinely speechless, which appeared to be a rare event. Aura's smile faded. I don't have much time. The transmission flickered. Behind her stood a massive structure, floating in darkness, an enormous ring, larger than a moon, ancient, damaged, covered with impossible symbols. The archive. Ethan knew immediately. All continued. They know you're coming. Who? Lyra asked. The answer arrived. Instantly, the convergence, the name, seemed to affect several scientists. Fear crossed their faces. All noticed. Then you've already learned something. The transmission distorted violently. Warning symbols flashed. All looked over her shoulder. Something had appeared. Behind her, a shadow, tall, humanoid. Watching, even through the static, Ethan felt uneasy. All looked back at them. You must reach the archive before they do. Why? Ethan asked. The answer came quietly. Because the future isn't collapsing. Silent. The future is being erased. The transmission began breaking apart. Allah's image fragmented. One final sentence escaped. Through the static, they're trying to remove our family from history. Then she vanished. The bridge fell silent. Outside the ship, the distorted vessel disappeared, gone as though it had never existed. Only the darkness of the black expanse remained. And somewhere ahead, hidden beyond twisted stars and broken timelines, the archive waited along with the mysterious convergence. And for the first time, Ethan realized something important. This was no longer about a prediction. Someone in the future was actively fighting to ensure that Lyra, and their descendants would never exist. The archive waited at the center of the black expanse. When the horizon finally emerged from the distortions, every person aboard fell silent. The structure was beyond enormous. Ancient rings surrounded a luminous core the size of a planet. Rivers of blue energy flowed between colossal towers suspended in space. Entire civilizations could have lived inside its corridors. The moment the ship approached the archive awakened, light spread across its surface. Symbols illuminated, the same symbols that had appeared within the predictive genetic system, the same symbols Ethan had somehow recognized. The horizon received an automatic transmission. A calm voice echoed through the bridge. Archive access granted. The crew exchanged nervous looks. Ethan sighed. Whenever mysterious ancient machines start recognizing me, bad things happen. Before anyone could reply, alarms erupted. The convergence had arrived. Hundreds of vessels emerged from temporal fractures around the archive. Some appeared damaged. Others looked centuries more advanced than Imperial technology. Each ship belonged to a future that should not exist. Final battle began immediately. Temporal weapons distorted reality itself. Entire sections of space flickered between different timelines. Stars appeared and vanished. Ships duplicated themselves. Others disappeared entirely. The horizon raced toward the archive while the Imperial fleet held the enemy back. Inside the archive, Ethan and Lyra reached the central chamber, waiting. There was not an army, not a weapon, a database, the largest collection of knowledge ever created. The archive contained the history of countless timelines, past, present, future. Everything. A final message appeared. Source of temporal instability identified. Images filled the chamber. The truth finally became clear. The Convergence were survivors. In their future, the galactic catastrophe had occurred, civilizations had fallen, entire species had vanished. Desperate to survive, they had begun erasing alternate futures and absorbing their timelines. Each successful eraser strengthened their own existence. All's timeline had become their next target. The reason was simple: her future contained the technology capable of ending the catastrophe permanently. If that future survived, the Convergence's damaged timeline would cease to dominate reality. Lyra studied the projections. So they chose survival at everyone else's expense. Looks that way. The archive revealed one final truth: the predictive genetic system had never truly predicted the future. It had identified the individuals most likely to create it, not destiny choice. The machine had never forced anything. It had simply recognized possibilities. Ethan stared at the display. For weeks, he had treated the entire situation like a cosmic joke, something happening to him, something beyond his control. Now, he understood. The future existed because people chose it, not because machines demanded it. For the first time since arriving at the palace, he felt strangely calm. Outside, the battle intensified. The archive activated its final protocol. A solution appeared. Risky, complicated, exactly the sort of thing a mechanic would hate and understand. Ethan smiled. I have an idea. Lyra immediately looked concerned. That reaction worries me. That's fair. Using the archive systems, Ethan linked the surviving timelines instead of allowing them to compete. The process took every ounce of computing power available, past and future connected. Broken reality stabilized. The Convergence's dying timeline was not erased, neither was Ara's. Both were preserved. The catastrophe was prevented without destroying anyone. Across space, the temporal fractures began closing. The battle ended. The distorted enemy vessels vanished peacefully. For the first time in generations, reality stopped tearing itself apart. Months later, the Empire looked different. Calmer, stronger. The predictive genetic system had been transformed into a scientific archive rather than a political tool. Research flourished. Exploration resumed. The Black Expanse became a place of discovery instead of fear. Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. The city glittered beneath the stars. Lyra joined him. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, she smiled. You're unusually quiet. I was thinking dangerous. I know. She laughed softly. The sound felt familiar now, comfortable. The silence returned, not awkward, peaceful. Far above them, a transmission arrived from the archive. A short recording. All appeared older this time, confident, happy. The future existed. She smiled toward them. Thank you. Then the message ended. Ethan looked at the stars. Weeks earlier, he had been a mechanic fixing forgotten machines in a desert. Now he understood that ordinary people could shape history, not through power, not through destiny, but through choices. Lyra gently took his hand. Neither needed to say anything. The future no longer belonged to a prediction. It belonged to them, and somewhere among the countless stars ahead, a future family was waiting to be written.